Hello, everybody. I see people are slowly joining our Zoom meeting here. Let's give a couple minutes for our last two or three students to join. And waiting on one more. And it looks like I have everybody here. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for tuning in promptly. I know some of you are in different time zones, but everybody made it on time. That's a good start. My name is Professor McKinley, and this is your Psychology 540 course, where we'll be going over interventions for collegiate athletes recovering from major injury. More specifically, for week one, we will be building an understanding of the holistic impact of major sports injuries for collegiate level athletes. So I'm sure some of you are aware, but in athletics, we are currently in a shift in the culture. It has been very physically driven, and athletes have been treated very much so like machines, being looked at for what they can provide for organizations, provide for teams, friends, and family even. And you're starting to see more athletes tune in and not tune in, but you're starting to see more athletes talk about what they go through mentally, the mental impacts of some of the pressures that they have to endure, and generally beginning to be more transparent about the fact that they are human beings, and they are not just machines, they are not just athletes, and some of them battle with similar problems, and some of them battle very specific problems for that are specific to the athletic realm. So like I said, many top athletes are beginning to shine a light on their struggles. But with that being said, it is still common when the athletes go down from an injury or they're separated from sport that we focus specifically on the physical realm of the injury or whatever's going on with them that separates them from their sport or activity. And we are not looking at the whole human being, and that part is not discussed. We are simply discussing the physical injury that is taking them off the field and not the holistic impact of what is going on with them. So moving forward, sports psychology is a growing field. You're starting to see more psychologists support the athletic realm, support athletes, join organizations, join coaching staffs, and rehabilitative teams. So with that, recently I had an experience where I interviewed a professional currently working in the field, and they talked to this very similar point. They had worked with the University of Texas, and they were expressing that they treat these athletes no different than they would treat any other client outside of the athletic realm, which is what we should be striving to do. Even for those of you in this course that are not trying to be sports psychologists, you have the potential to have a client who is an athlete from various levels that could end up being one of your clients, and you're providing treatment for them. So some quick recommendation before we get into the meat of this. In that interview with this fielded professional, they wanted to remind all of us, and this is for everybody in the field, to keep your educative hat on. Always strive to be learning. Always strive to remain competent. This goes directly into performing our duties appropriately, ethically, knowing when to consult, when to seek supervision, and also when to refer. Just like any other client, athletes come from very different backgrounds. They come from different cultures. They have different worldviews, very different perspectives on life. Some of them come from different socioeconomic statuses. Some of them come from different systems of religious beliefs, and all of these things can affect the impact that an injury has on them, can affect their development over time as not only an athlete but as a person. So a key to remember is not to change up what you do with any other client when an athlete steps through those doors. You still want to build a trusting relationship, an ethical relationship, keeping the athletes disregard, let's not call them athletes, taking the individual's best interest and keeping that at heart, regardless of working for an organization, regardless of getting paid by a third party. None of that should apply. We should always be striving to provide the most effective care for that client, for that individual, regardless of what their background is. So moving forward, when an athlete experiences an injury that takes them away from play, there are often a number of areas impacted. Today, we're going to learn about those various impacts of those injuries and how they affect these collegiate level athletes. We're talking between 18 and 23 years old. So there's a lot still going on developmentally with these individuals. They're processing things a little bit differently than your full-grown adult may be, and they're dealing with a lot of pressures that your normal individual is not facing. So it's important to understand that there's going to be a comprehensive impact on these individuals when they experience a devastating injury or just a major injury, and that separates them from a sport that they've been involved in for so long. This course will provide the base level of knowledge that must be understood for the concepts presented later in this curriculum to be applied appropriately. Before we go further, we're going to watch a video. So everybody bear with me while I share my screen. All right. I'm going to pull up a slideshow. Okay, and here we go. Already provided our introduction. Here are our lesson objectives. By the end of this course, you guys will learn the cognitive impact of major sports injuries, the behavioral impact, the emotional impact, and the social impact of major sport injuries. So let's give this video a second to load. Thank you all for your patience.
After a successful freshman campaign.
Before we go further, real quick point that I forgot to mention, please all have some note-taking material, or even if you have a tablet and a stylus, something to take notes so you can write down the key points from our lesson. But now let's continue this video.
Including a team podium finish in cross country, 4 individual Big Ten titles, and 3 All-American citations. I was riding a high that seemed untouchable. I was on top of the world. As accolades on the track and cross-country courses piled up, I felt more and more comfortable defining myself in terms of my running. It was my identity, the fact of being who I was. But then it started to take. A small limp erupted into a full fracture in my foot. With the #1 team ranking, Michigan women's cross country was supposed to challenge for the national title, and I was supposed to help lead them. For the first time in my tenure at Michigan, I was unable to do what I was supposed to do. Instead, I remained back home in Ann Arbor, my identity torn away from my physical being. I was miserable, depressed, and I hurt those closest to me. I wanted desperately to escape this sadness that overwhelmed every minute of every day. But how could I escape this agony if all I was running? And I couldn't run. Something deeper, something that would truly make me whole, was missing during this process of physical healing. Flash forward to my junior year. After a brief interlude of relative peace and healthy running, I was devastated once again with another stress fracture in my foot. This time, however, the stakes were higher. I had sacrificed a season of competition with my Michigan teammates for a shot at the Olympic trials. Another thing was different this time too. My friend and teammate asked if I wanted to go to summer Bible study with her. This Bible study was through Athletes in Action, or AIA, a campus ministry program. I joined and learned some pretty incredible things. This new knowledge and community led me to find purpose in something steadfast and unbreakable, unlike running in my bones. By placing my identity in God, I have a safe place to be when running or life doesn't work out the way I hope it will. If my best is not good enough, that does not mean I am not good enough, as I am someone who runs, not merely a runner. These revelations made all of the difference for the injury that barred an Olympic dream. I was sad, no doubt, but having found my purpose, I did not force myself to live every day in misery. I let myself smile and laugh. I allowed myself to enjoy things, even though I was not running. By redefining my identity and finding purpose, I redefined my life.
You are more than an athlete.
You are not alone.
We are one community.
All right, I'm sure you all quickly saw that injury involves more than just physical injury. There were numerous aspects that she explained about what she went through emotionally, how it affected her behavior, some of the social implications of it, numerous concepts that we are going to go on and explain as we go through our lesson today. Some key pieces that I take from that are that Erin was at the top of her game. It was her identity and a large part of who she was. She expressed frustration in not being able to help her team reach its expectations. She was separated from teammates, felt her identity had been torn away. She felt depressed. She felt running was her entire identity and had to redefine her identity and purpose to move forward. I want you to think on those concepts, and as we go through, start to think about the holistic impact. Think about what these athletes, what these individuals have to deal with after being separated from a sport that has become so much a part of who they are. So before we go further, I'm going to share my screen again, go back to the slideshow, and we're going to go into some facts about sports injuries, because it's a common misconception that athletes don't deal with things the same way that your normal person does. They're tougher, they deal with adversity better, they're mentally stronger. So let's humanize them, and let's present some of the facts around what they experience.
After a successful freshman campaign,
All right, some facts. Okay, so sports injury. We'll start with a small definition. Sport injury implies an organism dysfunction which normally produces pain, limitations, or interruption of sport activity, and potentially premature retirement that is sometimes traumatically perceived by an athlete. There are 7 million sport-related injuries per year, and that doesn't include unreported injuries. Injury has increased over time due to increase in professionalization, competitiveness, and practice extension. Injury often imperils the sport career and has an impact on economical, occupational, and educational aspects. In a survey completed on 217 Division I college athletes, 46% disclosed their dream goal was sports related, with the majority of that being male. Traditional outlook on sport injury is understood as damage to the body as a result of force exerted on the body. Note that that is only the physical aspect of injury that was identified in that study. Numerous studies have shown the importance of acknowledging the role of mental health on injury and rehab. Collegiate athletes typically express higher levels of stress following injury due to having to balance academic, psychosocial, and sports demands. In addition to that, collegiate athletes may be under magnified unwanted attention, or it may be wanted attention when they seek help, and this may have a negative effect on how they handle their injury. Research has shown consistent correlation between life stress and sport injury. Injuries commonly result in an immediate imbalance and disruption in the lives for the individual. To provide effective therapy, therapists should develop an understanding of the athletes as a whole person before they key in on performance concerns. And then on a positive note, injuries can be an opportunity for the client to reflect on priorities, recall how much they enjoy the sport, renew their motivation and commitment, learn new skills, and learn not to take things for granted. So moving forward, we're going to hear one more story from another high-level athlete on how they dealt with their injury.
Wrestling has been a huge part of my life since I was 4 years old. Rarely taken a break. When I was told that I would need surgery to repair my shoulder and it would be a long recovery, I was upset and very nervous. Since starting college, I have been having shoulder issues. In the past, I would rehab it with the help of my athletic trainer until the pain would subside. This became a cycle. As the cycle continued, I thought I had a new normal. Rehab, get better. Rehab, get better. Until the rehab wasn't working. In 2016, I had a great opportunity to make the Olympic team. I fell just short by placing second. I was, however, afforded the opportunity to go as a workout partner. I jumped right back into training with the goal of being the best workout partner that I could be. My shoulder, however, started acting up. I got an MRI and found out that I had torn my labrum and would need surgery. Not only was I out for the Olympics, but would also have to redshirt this whole next year. I sat at home in pain watching the Olympics on the TV. I was constantly reminded that I couldn't wrestle or work out with the team. Being on the side was difficult, feeling like I couldn't help my teammates, or that I was falling behind in the sport that had been a part of my life for as long as I could remember. I just wanted to get back on the mat, wrestling, doing what I loved. Being told to take it slow added to the frustration. When I was allowed to run, I sprinted. When I was allowed to lift, I loaded the bars. When I was allowed to drill, I went as hard as possible. Rather than taking it slow and letting my body heal, I rushed into everything and ended up having to take unnecessary days off due to my impatience. Taking it easy made me feel like I was taking the easy way out. It took me a while to accept that I was injured and that I was not currently able to do the things that I could before. Once I could accept the process, it got easier. I am now 1 year past my surgery, and I feel great. Once I took the process slow and listened to my body, understanding what it could and couldn't handle, things got easier. I learned I only need to worry about myself and not compare myself to others. Watching your teammates, seeing changes, it's hard not to question or compare to how they are doing. Learning to focus on myself, my recovery, and my career helped me embrace the temporary lifestyle of my injury and allowed me to become more rejuvenated and energized. My excitement is back fully, and I cannot wait to get back into competition.
You're not just an athlete.
Asking for help is a sign of strength.
You perform best when you're physically and mentally healthy.
All right, apologies for that. So now, after that video, a question I want to present to you all is what stood out to some of you after watching that video? Go ahead, Daniel, and unmute yourself. Outstanding answer. Outstanding answer. He also, just like how Aaron mentioned in the first video, her identity was stripped away. Who has something else that they noticed? Go ahead, Tiffany. Remember to unmute. Great insight. Great insight. I also picked up on that when I first saw this video. He was consumed by the thoughts of his abilities and on if he was going to be able to keep up with other wrestlers, both his teammates and those who he was going to compete with. Great injects from both of you. Thank you very much for contributing to the class. But here's the key points that I picked up. I'm going to list some of them. He mentioned that this sport had been a big part of his life since he was in his youth. He felt multiple emotions following the injury. He was at the top of his game, an Olympic hopeful. He saw resolution to his injury. His identity felt stripped away. He did not adhere to his rehabilitative plan, which ended up elongating it. He was consumed by thoughts of his abilities. He ended up accepting the process through a change of perspective, and he ended up returning to competition healthy because of that change. So keep all these concepts in mind as we move into our next topic. We are now going to break down the impact of injury on collegiate athletes by highlighting the cognitive and psychological impact of injury. So I have a couple bullet points on the screen, but I'm also going to utilize my lesson plan over here. Studies have shown that psychological issues or impacts are a vital aspect in the decision of the individual to return to practice or athletic competition. I'm sure many of you have heard the phrase that in athletics, it's 90% mental, 10% physical. And I had been hearing this all since, all through my childhood into adulthood. I'm sure some of you have as well, but we never considered it on the recovery side, on a rehabilitation, and then also and how much of that applies to the performance on the field for that individual. One resource went as far as to state almost all athletes experience some sort of psychological distress following an injury, and that can interfere with their recovery as well. The cognitive and psychological effects of an injury have the potential to be as debilitating as the physical injury. That's a super key piece right there, showing you the importance of considering or looking at this athlete, this individual as a human being and not just treating for the physical aspect. Psychological distress following an injury can include the following: re-injury anxiety, depressive symptoms, and a loss of their athletic identity. Thinking on those videos, both of these athletes felt all three of those things. One felt it so much so that he did not adhere to the rehabilitative plan. Sorry, I jumped ahead there. Re-injury anxiety, to provide you all a definition for that, is an irrational and debilitating fear of anxiety that physical movement will result in a re-injury. Re-injury anxiety is one of the most commonly reported psychological reactions to injury and is the most common reported by injured athletes for not returning to play. Re-injury anxiety is commonly correlated with lessened self-confidence in the ability to return to competition. So on that note, we are going to move into an example. And an example that comes to mind for me, let's all picture for a second. You have a college level top performing running back, and let's say he experiences an ACL accident. He tore his left ACL. So his left knee is compromised. He goes through rehab. He finishes the physical aspect of his treatment, but doesn't necessarily complete the mental aspect of his treatment. So he returns to practice. Remember that his left knee is injured. So one of the plays in practice, they do a run out to the left. The individual is afraid to plant on his left knee out of fear of hurting it. Darts to the left, planting on his right leg, goes out of bounds, doesn't gain any yardage. And coach is starting to notice that he continues to favor that left knee and he is not planning on that. So the coach pulls him to the side, puts in the backup, and he's talking to the athlete and he's like, what's going on? Why are you not running as aggressively as I'm used to seeing? And the athlete expresses his worry to him. I don't trust my knee. I'm worried about twisting my knee again. I've been through so much already. I can't imagine going back into rehab. This forces the athlete out of play for an extended period because he was not treated fully. They end up pulling him from practice. He's entered back into treatment, mental health treatment. The doctor reconfirms that his knee is good to go. Coach and the athlete are confident that it is strictly the mental aspect of things that needs to be treated going forward. So now this athlete is having to deal with an extended rehabilitative period because the mental aspect was not treated as it should have been initially. Moving forwards. Continued. Okay, some injuries, especially concussions, can lead to diminished concentration, lack of focus, increased distractibility, and increased perception of pain. With that, I'm sure a lot of us have heard about CTE recently, which is a degenerative condition where the brain starts to fire on less and less cylinders as we continue to take damage to our brains. So you can imagine for a student athlete, this doesn't just affect them on the field. They have college level studies that they have to adhere to. They have college level, they have academic requirements that they have to adhere to. So this affects more than just the sport realm when you have concussions. Also with concussions, they often come with an unsure or not concrete length to the length of rehab. So it could be a couple weeks, could be months, depends on the individual and how their brain responds to that trauma. But in a study that was conducted on football players at the Division I level, 33% of injured athletes and 27% of non-injured athletes, reported depressive symptoms. The severity of depression usually varies based on the injury, the limits to the client's mobility, the proposed length of the rehab, and any setbacks that they may have had. So again, looking back at those videos, the wrestler did not adhere to the rehabilitative plan, and this led to an elongated rehab period, and he had a setback because he ended up tweaking that shoulder. It is also common for student athletes to grieve or have feelings of loss following a major injury. Remember, both individuals stated that their sport was a huge part of their identity. So when that is pulled from them, it is like grieving or a lost family member. It's grieving a part of themselves that they may never see again, they may never feel again. So there are some intense feelings of grief that often go along with that. the client's perception of their injury plays more vital of a role in recovery than the fact that it happened. So imagine one athlete hurts themselves, but they believe from day one that they're going to recover from it and they are going to get back into play. This definitely increases the likelihood that they will come back healthy. I'm not saying that they'll be able to be 100% at the ability they were before, but they highly increase the likelihood of that happening. Whereas athlete B, they view their injury completely different. They're like, this injury is devastating. I may never recover from it. And that kind of thinking has a direct impact on if they'll even give their all in therapy or give their all in a physical therapy, mental health treatment. If they already believe there's no chance leading into it, there's going to be a lessened likelihood that they will recover from it the same way that first athlete will. Loss of athletic identity is a common issue that collegiate athletes face, and it is more evident in individuals who utilize sport involvement as a source of self-worth. So we hit on that self-worth topic numerous times through there. The injured athlete may feel worrisome about meeting their internal and external performance expectations and fear of appearing athletically incompetent. We heard Erin say that she dwelled on not being able to help her team reach its goals. We've heard the second individual talked about his goals of going to the Olympics and how he had to pull out. These are his internal goals. That team and their goals, that's an external force, that's an external goal that he's trying to achieve. But now that we've gone through a lot of the cognitive and psychological impacts, we're going to continue. And now that we've gone into the thinking behind it, we're going to go into the emotional responses that happen from those cognitive beliefs. So individuals, often in sports, as we said, most people see athletes as being stronger, being more mentally tough. With that, the culture of certain sports creates a stigma where they do not want to express any form of weakness. So with that, individuals will be reluctant to seek mental health treatment, or I should say may, not will, sorry about that, mental health treatment services, and it may be reluctant to share their emotions. Their responses can include frustration, anger about what happened, rage even, irritability, fear of not recovering, grief over their lost identity, perceived lost identity, depression, feelings of anxiety and tension. Major injury can cause a feeling of grief. Just talked on that. The fact that I'm hitting on it so many times, it should show you how major or how large this impact is on individuals. It shows up time and time again when you're looking up studies and research on what an individual experiences following a loss like this. On that same note, there's 3 grief states typically when an individual is experiencing a loss of identity. There's distress, there's denial, and then there's determined coping, and this is a cycle. Fear is a prominent emotion throughout that. There's an intense fear of, will I be able to recover from this? Frustration is a top emotion reported by injured athletes, and that can be for a number of reasons. It could be frustration that the injury occurred at all. It could be the result of failing to progress through rehab the way that they thought they would progress. It could be due to setbacks. It could be as bad as not being able to be around their teammates, or not being able to be in practice, not being able to contribute to the team. All of these things can create frustration. I just mentioned not being with their teammates. That leads to that last bullet, feeling of social isolation. And that can have numerous emotional effects that I just listed up higher on here. As I stated before, in that study with those Division I football players, 1/3 of those athletes reported feelings of depression following injury, and that negatively impacts recovery. I want you all to take special note at how the development of a player over time, due to the culture of their sport, for example, football, where maybe you'll have a coach ask when you're getting up after getting hit, are you hurt or are you injured? I remember coming up like that, where you were expected to suck it up and continue on for the sake of the team and to win. A lot of players that are idolized by youth athletes coming up. A lot of those players that are idolized, they've fought through pain, they played with injuries, and this is what goes along with that culture of a sport. Or think of boxers, think of hockey players getting teeth knocked out and continuing to play. That's what I mean by the culture of a sport and how that can affect it. Many athletes do not want to appear weak in front of their coaches, their teammates, opponents, family, friends. They're used to being the strong one, the athletic one, the contributor. So these are things that are hard for them to deal with following an injury. Also, remember that being an athlete is a very large part of who these students are, and potentially losing that will result in major emotional responses. These are large parts of their identities. Most of them have been doing it since they were small children. And it's been a part of their life throughout their entire development. So now that we have gone over some cognitions and some resulting emotions, let's discuss some behavioral impacts. All right, so following a major injury, an individual may experience various impacts that can include changes to their sleep. They may not be getting good sleep because they can't get it off of their mind. Avoidance of social interaction. I just talked about maybe not wanting to be seen as weak or being needy around their teammates or friends. Changes in their eating habits. Some athletes go as far to feel that they don't deserve to eat. They'll punish themselves. Substance abuse. They may resort to drinking to try to cope, or even drugs to try to cope. And in the most extreme situations, we've even seen suicidal ideations and even suicide attempts and completed suicides from athletes following injury while they're in that recovery phase. It is very common for individuals to socially isolate themselves following an injury. Athletes may continue to dwell on their injury and can catastrophize their situation. So regardless of what a doctor's telling them, friends are telling them, oh, you'll be all right, you'll make a comeback, they may continue to think that, oh man, I'm never going to come back. I'll never be able to jump as high. I'll never be able to run as fast. And this can be very detrimental to their recovery, and can lead to some of that debilitating effect that we talked about at the beginning of the lesson. Excuse me. In extreme circumstances, it is not uncommon for an individual to have suicidal ideations. An example of this is there was an athlete that played for South Carolina, the Gamecocks, the football team, a receiver named Kenny McKinley. He had a knee injury similar to that example that I shared earlier with the running back. And rehab wasn't going the way that he thought it was going to go. He was starting to isolate from the team. He was trying to come back and had ended up re-injuring that knee. And due to never believing he would be able to recover and to play the way that he did before, unfortunately, that individual ended up committing suicide. And he is not, by far, not the only one who has gone that route. Sad to say. Common factors for completed suicides include lots of success prior to their injury. We heard both athletes in those videos talked about how they were top-level performers. Injuries requiring surgery, normally perceived as being worse than the ones that don't require surgery. Long rehabilitative plans with restriction of play. Inability to attain the level of play prior to the injury and having their position replaced. That having that backup player come in and take their position and not being or feeling that they're not in the coach's good graces can have a very detrimental effect. Already talked about individuals changing their eating habits, individuals resorting to alcohol consumption. One thing I did not hit on earlier was that some individuals may resort to banned substances. So we're talking testosterone boosters, estrogen blockers, steroids, things that they believe are going to help them recover from their injury faster and recover from their injury stronger than they were prior. In a survey conducted in 2001, over a quarter of collegiate athletes used steroids following injury. Setbacks in rehab can lead to less adherence to the rehabilitative plan due to felt frustration. The rehab's not going well. It's not going the way I perceived. Why should I take it seriously? Why should I do everything that this therapist tells me to do? So the individual may even begin to not show up to their rehab appointments, or like I said, may not take it seriously when they are present at the appointments. Individuals may avoid seeking mental health treatment due to the stigma surrounding appearing mentally weak and believing that avoiding treatment is a sign of them being mentally tough. So it's a key piece to get those people around them, to get that coaching staff, and also for you to explain the strength behind getting help. So now that we talked about behavior, and I slightly alluded to some of that social support, we're going to go into the social impact of major injury. And this is a big one, so pay close attention. As mentioned above, athletics are a large part of these individuals' identities, and a majority of their social life is involved and surrounded by members of their team, their teammates, or close fans or friends of those teammates. So social interactions commonly take a hit or lessen following an injury, because that injury is going to separate them from team activities. Or maybe it's a leg injury that prevents them from getting out to events the way that they were prior. We already mentioned individuals may isolate themselves out of fear of looking weak to those around them. But on a positive note, athletes often do draw strength from their teammates, family, and friends, and it can be very effective to try to keep them around their team, keep them out with friends, keep them socially engaged. It goes a long way. Collegiate athletes may experience criticism and judgment from the media, their fan base, even coaching staff and teammates, especially if rehab isn't progressing well or if it is a long rehabilitative plan. So that's just something to think about. If some of these athletes, many collegiate athletes, are being talked about on the school website, excuse me, some even on ESPN, some on Sports Center, some on Fox Sports, and their injury is being talked about, and that can have a very negative effect on many athletes. They don't handle it too well. So just a consideration. The interaction between an individual and the coaches typically declines unless you have a very engaged coach, or unless this is a top performer on the team. You do see that coaches will apply more effort in maintaining contact. The individual may experience changes in relationships following the injury. And an extreme example, maybe the perceptions of their support is not a reality. We all have heard, you see who your true friends are in your worst times. And that is going to happen to some of these players. Friends that they thought had their back regardless of what they went through may not be present. Also, if you have an athlete or an individual who may be a family's savior in a sense, or hero in regards to being the provider of generational wealth, and they become injured, there may be changes in that relationship. Their family member may not look at them the same if they're dependent on them, or they may even begin to criticize them for not taking rehab seriously, or etc. These are just some examples of how this can manifest itself. They may experience pressure from those around them. That's what I was just alluding to with the families. And sometimes this can cause them to deviate from the rehabilitative plan, because think about, if a family member is depending on them, a friend is depending on them to be playing, or them playing is the reason why they're able to keep their scholarship, they are going to be motivated to deviate from the plan and get back to play sooner. That's where the medical staff and the mental health staff, it's going to be a large job of theirs to ensure that this individual is not making a decision that's detrimental to their own health and their own safety. Injury often causes the individual to experience their role change with the team. We talked about that, a substitute being put in their spot. That hurts some athletes very much so. and they may even feel betrayed by the coaching staff. This can have detrimental effects. While this doesn't happen often, there is a possibility that the individual loses their scholarship. This is the most extreme cases. We talked about the educational impacts of an injury, the potential economic impacts, because think about what that degree could offer for them. Think about if they do go on to play at a higher level of play, they go pro. We're talking literal millions of dollars that are now not going to be in this individual's hands due to this injury. So that is a consideration. Family, friends, teammates, and coaching staff may rely on the individual's health in some capacity, and that is a danger. That goes back to what I was talking about with the family that may be dependent on them. So an important thing to remember here is that, let me stop sharing for a second. Okay, an important thing to remember here is that human beings are social creatures. We thrive off of social interaction, and due to that, that social interaction is going to have huge impacts on how this athlete responds to some of these injuries. So some may even experience more impact due to having more exposure related to their participation in college level sports via television, internet, social media, and just being known by more people in general. They're going to have more pressures on them than your typical individual, you or me, walking around. The average person doesn't know us, but think about a top level college athlete at their university. There's not many places they can walk on campus, and they aren't noticed, they aren't identified. Something to think about. It is common for injured athletes to remain in the spotlight until they're able to return, or until it is ultimately understood the injury is going to be career ending. So like I was saying, some athletes every week, some media source is going to be talking about the injury status. Are they going to play this week? Were there any setbacks in rehab? They are going to be the topic of discussion, and this can cause an athlete to dwell, even if you're helping them get over it. All it takes is them seeing it on Sports Center one day, or seeing it on the school website one day, and it could lead them right back to thinking about their injury and the initial event that caused all the feelings, all the cognitions, all the psychological effects, all of the behavioral effects and the emotions that they're feeling. So that's something to consider as well. Some athletes may also battle with no longer being in that spotlight and may respond to an absence of attention notoriety. Some of these athletes really thrive. They've had spectators since they first began in this sport. They've had fans since they first began. They've made a lot of friends due to what they're able to do within their sport, and losing that, or perceiving that they're going to lose that, can affect them very negatively. So now that we've talked about that, going into a discussion question with cognitive, emotional, behavioral, and social impacts now presented, what effects can occur from a college level athlete believing they will never recover from their recent injury? And I provided a short example before, where if an individual believes right after the injury that they'll never recover, they may not take rehab seriously. They may not even take the medical treatment seriously, or assume the worst. Everything that the doctor says, they will assume the worst, or they may not show up to their appointments with the psychologist, the therapist, or the athletic trainers, if they feel like it's for no reason, you know. So there's a quick example. So let me call out on some people who has some examples, or who has an opinion on how an athlete may respond. Go ahead, Angel. Outstanding. That's exactly where I need your head to be at. Let me just get one more before we move forward. All right, Monica. Okay. It seems like these concepts are really being absorbed. This makes me really happy to hear. So seeing that you guys have absorbed these concepts, we are now going to go into a group activity for about we'll say 15 minutes. So let me share the screen one more time. Okay. That was our question we just asked. Okay, I'm going to need you all to break into 3 groups. We have 10 here. So we're going to split you into 3 groups. One will have 4. So you will see on the whiteboard, I have already split you into your groups. Each group is going to be assigned a sample athlete, athletes A, B, and C. Based on the synopsis of the athletes, describe at least 4 potential impacts, one from each aspect taught today, the injury may have on the athlete as they begin rehabilitation and recovery. Athlete A, Sarah is a sophomore volleyball player at the University of Maryland. She has been playing volleyball since middle school. Sarah comes from a family of volleyball players and followed the family tradition by playing at the University of Maryland. She has been striving to become the best player at her position and wants to help her team with a conference title. She has 2 close friends of hers who also play on the team. After playing throughout high school together, and they have talked about playing on the Olympic team after college. Those close to her often explain that Sarah eats, sleeps, and breathes volleyball when she is not working on schoolwork. In last week's game, Sarah came down awkwardly after spiking a ball and has been diagnosed with a torn MCL. Medical personnel have told Sarah she will require a minor surgical procedure that will sideline her for at least 6 to 8 weeks. Athlete B. Matthew is a Division I shortstop on the University of Oklahoma baseball team. Matt has been receiving accolades for his baseball skills since he first began playing at 6 years old. Although only a freshman, Matt is already being talked about in sports media about his ability to play professionally and to contribute to the successes of a major league team. The only downside for Matt is that he can be described as being cocky, loves being the center of attention in the media, and is regularly spotted out partying. 2 weeks ago, Matt grabbed his elbow in agony after a hard throw to home plate. Matt has been diagnosed with an ulnar collateral ligament injury that will take him out of play for at least 6 weeks. Since the injury, Matt hasn't been acting like his normal self. He is no longer going to parties, and media sportscasters express concern about whether Matt will ever be the same. Some of his fellow teammates have reported that Matt rarely answers his phone, hasn't been seen around the baseball facility, and doesn't reach out to them like he did prior to the injury. And for our final athlete, Andre is a junior wide receiver at UCLA. Andre has been playing football since Pop Warner football at 7 years old. Andre was one of the top 10 wide receivers in the country leaving high school and is in the top 5 in his team's conference for receiving yards this season. Andre is the first member of his family to go to college, has talked about being able to create generational wealth for his family, and has aspirations to forego his senior season to go to the NFL. Last Saturday, Andre tore his ACL in the final quarter after a low tackle from a defending player. Andre has been seen crying on multiple occasions. His professors have reported his grades have been slipping and has frequently talked about not knowing what he is going to do following his injury. Andre's roommate has reported that he has been drinking a lot and has been avoiding his weekly calls from his family. So let's all break up 15 minutes and then we'll reconvene. You all did an outstanding job on that group activity. I can really tell that these concepts hit home. So moving forward, I'm going to provide you 2 examples of some resources that you can that you both can use, and then also your athletes can use. So we have the Advocates for Injured Athletes, and we have the Injured Athletes Club. And what both of these provide is information on how injury affects individuals. It has other athletes who have experienced injuries and how they recovered, supportive forums for the athletes to talk about what they're going through, and everybody is very positive in those forums. And it also has some links to podcasts and videos and just resources to help individuals recover following injuries. So to wrap this whole thing up, first I want to make it known that I'm going to make myself available for discussion for 15 minutes following this lesson. I want to thank you all for remaining focused and engaged throughout this entire lesson. It was really evident that you really care about the field that you're getting into. You really care about people. You want to provide the best level of treatment moving forward. And you guys really just locked in on those concepts that we presented today. So as I stated in the introduction, we are in the midst of a cultural shift in athletics, and athletes are starting to receive the mental health treatment that they've always needed, and they're starting to be treated like a human being, which is how they deserve to be treated. Some of you in here may end up being the key catalyst in aiding an athlete in recovering from a major injury by treating them holistically, treating the whole person. I'm looking forward to the remainder of this curriculum and seeing the 3-session treatment plan that you all generate in week 4. If you have any questions, as I said, I'll be standing by for 15 minutes after we dismiss, so please do not be shy. I know this topic generates tons of thoughts and ideas and opinions, and we could talk for hours and hours about this. For those who will not be hanging back, have a great day, and thank you again for paying attention throughout today's lesson. See you all next week.